Well, welcome, Redeemer Bible, to the Daily Word. Pastor Tim here. It's Friday, the 22nd of January, 2021, and we are in Matthew 14, verses 1 through 21. It's an interesting section as the Word switches from all the parables we learned about in the last couple of days to a very real-life, graphic, and sort of well-known and remembered scenario. It's a bit of a jolt and a switch of gears from Jesus speaking and revealing truth with a pastor's heart, showing him the kingdom of heaven, showing his God side, if you will, to the latter part of this section will show his human side in a heartfelt and compassionate moment. And then ending with feeding the 5,000. Sorry for the spoiler alert, but that's what's going to happen. The death of John the Baptist is also recorded in Mark 6 and Luke 9. So let's start, and I'm in the ESV. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard about the fame of Jesus, and he said to his servants, "This is John the Baptist. He's been raised from the dead. That is why these miraculous powers are at work in him." For Herod had seized John and bound him and put him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because John had been saying to him, "It is not lawful for you to have her." So John finds himself in prison for having the audacity to call out Herod for his moral failings involving brothers, uncles, marriage, and inappropriate relationships. It's a train wreck. I don't know how he confronted Herod and how word traveled back in the day, but to our 21st century minds, it seems odd as we seemingly can source anything and make all kinds of quick judgments online. John was a courageous man and stood by what he knew to be clearly in conflict with the God he was serving, and he acted and paid a price. In our day, we can say all kinds of things that we want to say. We have that access with very little consequence. God knows. God, every word we utter, he knows, but the world would just let it go. Well, this, as we'll hear in the story, he paid a huge price for being brave and being courageous. So, verse 5, it says, and though he wanted to put him to death, he feared the people because they held him to be a prophet. But when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced before the company and pleased Herod, so that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she might ask. Prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me the head of John the Baptist here on a platter," which, in our it's a very odd request, but, this is the way it played out. So clearly, Herod was a weak man, and he was caught in a trap, caught by his own words. Everything he did was to stay in good favor with the people and the people around him. Probably why he was a good politician. He was a pleaser, but his people pleasing was his downfall, and most of us can relate to that in some way, shape, or form. We are to please God and God alone, but we get so distracted by what people might think of us, and we want to say the right thing. We don't want to stand out, but we are called to please only one person. And the ironic part is that people don't really care. They really don't. So we put a lot of gravity on what they're thinking of us, and it just doesn't matter. People come and go. It doesn't mean you're oblivious or callous, but our opinion is not shaped by the culture, but we allow it. So we all have a people-pleasing part of us. It's just not, it doesn't end well. So in verse 9 it says, "And the king was sorry, but because of his oaths and his guests, he commanded it to be given. He sent and had John beheaded in the prison, and his head was brought on a platter and given to the girl, and she brought it to her mother." Not what you normally see in a party scene, just letting you know that. "And his disciples came and took the body and buried it, and they went and told Jesus." What a moment for those men who loved John so much, and to have to find Jesus and tell him what happened. And his reaction was so moving and so real and emotional. If you ever thought you were serving an unfeeling, uncaring, all business type of God, this section will dispel that notion for you. So let's go to verse 13. So when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. And when he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. So, in some of our eyes, at times in our life, we feel God doesn't care. Things aren't going our way. The world seems to be against us. So absorb verse 14. It said Jesus, in the middle of the death of John the Baptist, and in two chapters down the road in this book, He's addressing his future with Peter, so he knows the story. He knows what fate awaits him. Yet, he finds within himself a level of compassion and care to heal and to love people. He got over himself and did what he needed to do. Newsflash, in case you don't know this, it's not about us, never has been, never will be. If you're not moved to act in moments of pain and suffering in others, find out why. Find the heart of Jesus in you and what is preventing you. The compassion continues in verse 15. It's amazing. So when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the day is now over. Send the crowds away to go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They said to him, "We have only 5 loaves here and 2 fish." So the disciples were ready to check out. They were ready to find some fast food and call it a day. Jesus says, "No, these are my people. I will care for them." So in verse 18 he says, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing. Then he broke the loaves and gave them to his disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 12 baskets full of the broken pieces left over, and those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Well, obviously we know the feeding of the 5,000 is certainly one of the most important miracles of Jesus, if we were to judge by the attention given it to by the gospel writers. It's the only miracle recorded in all 4 gospel writers. So as a little add-on after this, read the other accounts. You get a little bit of a different flavor, but it's really important. And in reality, it was about 15,000 people, because back in the day, culturally, customarily, you count only the men. 15,000 people in a moment. So, we, in our humanity, we would love to know how that all played out. Of course, it's an astonishing thing to do, but God doesn't expect us to be miraculous in that manner. But in our day-to-day walking around world, we will have moments presented to us that we can enter in and provide small moments of help. Find your heart. Find what you can see in people that moves you. Anything you can do to get off your own self-involved life is just always going to work well. It's a struggle because we kind of like each other, like ourselves way too much. But Jesus, in the midst of all this past grief, the grief to come, the pressure, he found his way to care. That's what this is all about today. So, one more day tomorrow and we'll finish this out.